I was in the shower when I heard the basement door slam shut. The problem is, I live alone. At first, I thought it was the wind. The kind of sudden pressure change that happens when a storm rolls in. Windows rattle, the air feels heavy. But the sound wasn't like that. It was sharp, solid. It echoed through the pipes above me. The whole bathroom went quiet afterward, like the house was holding its breath. It was late, almost midnight. The storm had been creeping closer for hours. Flashes of light cutting through the curtains, thunder grumbling in the distance. I liked storms, usually. I'd just moved into that old rental a few weeks earlier, and it still felt more like someone else's home than mine. The sound of rain on the roof helped me relax. Until that slam. I turned off the water and just stood there, dripping, trying to decide if I'd really heard it. The house was old. The kind of place that groans when it settles. Maybe a door shifted in the frame, maybe air pressure did it, but something about the sound felt deliberate, like someone had grabbed the door and thrown it shut. I stepped out, wrapped a towel around myself, and listened. Nothing. Just rain tapping the window and the faint hum of the fridge downstairs. Then my dog started barking. It came from the living room, sharp, panicked barks, the kind she never made unless she saw something. The hair on my arm stood up instantly. I rushed into the hall, heart hammering. "Luna?" I called. She barked again, louder this time, claws scratching on the hardwood floor. The sound was coming from near the kitchen, right where the basement door was. I froze halfway down the stairs. My whole body felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. Every instinct screamed not to go down there. But the rational part of me, the part that didn't want to feel stupid, forced me forward. The power flickered just as I hit the bottom step. Lights dimmed, then came back. Luna was standing stiffly in front of the basement door, ears up, tail tucked. The door itself was slightly open, just an inch or two, swinging gently like someone had just stepped through it. "Hey," I whispered, trying to sound calm, though my throat was tight. "It's just the wind, okay?" She didn't move. Didn't even look at me. Her eyes stayed fixed on the gap in the door. I reached out slowly and pushed it shut. The old wood creaked against the frame. Then, with a shaky breath, I clicked the lock. "See?" I said, forcing a smile. "All good." Luna didn't relax. She kept staring. A moment later, thunder cracked outside, so close it rattled the windows. The lights flickered again, this time longer, like the house couldn't decide if it wanted to stay lit. I decided I'd had enough. I took Luna upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and turned on the TV just for background noise. It helped. A little. The flickering light from the screen made the storm outside feel distant again, like it belonged to another world. I must have sat there for 15 minutes before my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "You locked the basement earlier, right?" My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, reading it again, like the words might change. I hadn't told her anything. She didn't even know the house had a basement. "Why?" I texted back. She replied almost instantly. "Just saw something in the security camera. Looks like the basement door's open." I felt my chest tighten. The house didn't even have a camera system. Not one that I'd set up anyway. The landlord had mentioned there used to be one from a previous tenant, but I'd never found any sign of it. Before I could type another message, Luna growled. Low, guttural, like she was warning something she couldn't see. The sound came again, not from her this time. From downstairs, footsteps, slow, uneven, heavy, like someone testing the floorboards. I muted the TV and held my breath. The footsteps stopped too. "Hello," I called out, though I already knew I shouldn't. No answer. The rain hit harder against the glass. Thunder rolled. Somewhere in the house, a pipe popped. For a second, I convinced myself that was all it was. But then the basement door creaked again. It wasn't loud, just enough to make Luna whine and back toward me. I stepped out into the hallway, my bare feet cold against the floor. Every part of me wanted to turn back, but I kept walking, one slow step at a time, until I could see the bottom of the stairs again. The door was open wider now, not swinging, just wider. I felt dizzy. My reflection in the window beside the staircase looked pale, strange, like I was seeing myself through someone else's eyes. I grabbed my phone and opened the flashlight. The beam caught the door handle, old brass, scratched and dull, and then slid down into darkness. The stairs vanished after the fourth step. I swallowed hard. Hello? No sound. Not even the hum of the fridge this time. just rain, just silence. I started filming without thinking, part habit, part proof for my own sanity. The phone trembled in my hand. I zoomed in on the dark space beneath the stairs, then slowly panned up the open door. That's when the power went out completely. The flashlight blinked off. The house fell into absolute blackness. Luna barked once, loud, sharp, then bolted down the hallway. I stumbled backward, slamming my shoulder into the wall. I tried to find the phone's flashlight again, fumbling, shaking. When the light came back on, the door was closed. Not halfway, not cracked, fully shut. I couldn't even breathe. For a moment, it didn't feel real, like my mind had just filled in the blanks with fear. But then, right before I could move, the lock clicked. From the other side, the lock clicked. Once, sharp and mechanical, the sound of metal sliding against metal from the other side of the door. For a full second, I just stood there, my phone's light shaking in my hand, heart beating so loud it drowned out the storm. Then I whispered, barely audibly, "Who's there?" Nothing. Only the rain tapping on the windows and the faint groan of the floor under my own feet. I took a slow step backward. The air in the hallway felt heavy, damp, like the house itself was holding its breath with me. I couldn't stop staring at that doorknob. The brass handle glinted faintly in the light. Then, as I watched, it moved. Just a small turn, like someone testing it, gently. I froze. My throat felt dry, my mind screaming to run, but my legs refused. The handle turned again, this time a slow, steady twist until the latch clicked open and then stopped. The door didn't open, it just waited. My voice shook. "I'm calling the police." Still nothing. I started backing away toward the kitchen, never taking my eyes off that door. Luna was standing in the corner, low growl rumbling deep in her chest. Her fur stood up along her spine. She could sense it, whatever it was. And then all at once, something pushed from behind the door. A dull, heavy thud, the hinges creaked. I dropped my phone. The light spun across the floor, throwing twisted shadows up the walls. Silence. I knelt to grab it, fingers trembling. That's when I heard it. A breath. Not a sigh, not the house, but the clear sound of someone breathing, slow and deliberate, right on the other side of the wood. I froze mid-motion, crouched low, staring at the line of light under the door. And then I saw it. The faint shadow of movement, shifting back and forth, like feet repositioning in the dark. I whispered Luna's name, trying not to make noise, but she whimpered softly. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. Then the door slammed. The noise cracked through the house like a gunshot. I screamed, couldn't even help it. The echo seemed to go on forever, swallowed by the thunder outside. Luna bolted down the hall. The air felt suddenly wrong, colder. I snatched my phone and ran. I didn't stop to think, didn't look back. I just ran barefoot toward the front door, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. When I reached for the doorknob, it wouldn't turn. Locked. From the inside. My shaking fingers fumbled with the deadbolt until it finally gave. I yanked the door open and stumbled out into the rain. The wind hit me like ice. My towel was soaked in seconds, clinging to my skin, but I didn't care. I turned back once. The house stood there in the storm, dark windows staring like blind eyes. And then, for just a second, I saw the basement curtain move. A single hand pressed against the glass, not waving, just resting there. I ran, down the muddy path through puddles that splashed up my legs, not even knowing where I was going. Luna stayed right on my heels. My phone buzzed in my hand, lighting up my fingers. It was my mom again. "Honey, are you okay?" I just saw the basement door open again. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My lungs burned, every breath came out ragged and wet. I made it to the edge of the property, the old fence line that bordered the woods, and stopped only when I saw headlights through the rain. A neighbor, Mr. Hensley, the old man from 2 houses down. He'd heard me screaming. He jumped out of his truck before it even stopped rolling. "You alright? What happened?" I could barely talk. "Someone. In my house." He looked at me, then up toward the house. The porch light flickered twice, then went dark completely. "Stay here," he said, grabbing a flashlight from the seat. "I'm calling the sheriff." I begged him not to go, but he was already jogging through the rain, light bobbing ahead of him. It couldn't have been more than 2 minutes, 2 long, endless minutes, before I saw him come back down the path. His face was pale, his voice was shaking when he said, "There's no one in there. No signs of anyone." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But when the police came later that night, they found something he hadn't noticed: muddy footprints. Leading up from the basement, they stopped halfway across the living room. No exit, no return path, just ended like whoever made them had disappeared into the floor. The officer told me the door had been unlocked when they arrived. No signs of forced entry. But in the corner, near the basement steps, they found something else: an old sleeping bag, a half-empty bottle of water, and a single Polaroid photo. The picture showed the basement door, closed, and a faint outline of someone standing behind it. The timestamp was from 2 nights before. I didn't stay there after that. The landlord let me out of my lease without argument. I packed what I could the next morning, left everything else behind. Sometimes, though, when I close my eyes, I still hear that door slam. Sometimes, in the quiet moments right before sleep, I swear I can feel the air pressure shift. Just like it did that night. As if a door somewhere nearby just opened. And I still wonder about that Polaroid. If the picture was taken before that night, then who was holding the camera? When morning came, the rain had stopped, but the house still smelled of wet earth and dust. Police tape fluttered across the doorway. One of the officers told her quietly, "It looks like somebody had been staying down there for a while." Inside the basement, they found canned food, an old blanket, a box of matches, and muddy footprints circling the furnace. A narrow vent ran up toward the kitchen floorboards, the place she'd heard that breathing. She moved out the same day. Yet sometimes, when she's in another apartment and the pipes knock or a hinge settles, she pauses. Because every creak sounds just a little too deliberate. And in that split second, she's back in that hallway, watching the basement door slowly drift open again. Story 2. The face at the window. It started with the motion light. Every night, sometime after 2:30, it clicked on. The short, sharp pop of electricity cutting through the silence, then went dark again. The first night, I blamed the wind. The second, I told myself it was a stray cat. By the third, I was checking the window before the light even had time to blink. I was living alone for a few weeks while my parents were out of town. Ground floor apartment, 1 small bedroom, a patch of backyard behind the glass sliding door. I was in college, used to staying up late, half my nights spent at my desk gaming with a headset on. Outside, the city hummed under rain. Inside, only the sound of my keyboard and the hum of the PC fan. It was almost 3 when the motion light came on again. I paused my game. The glow from outside pushed through the blinds, carving pale stripes across the carpet. I waited. Listened. Nothing. Then, something moved. A quick blur crossing that light, low and close to the glass. I spun in my chair, but by the time I reached the window, the light had already gone out. I sat there for a while, trying to steady my breathing. The air felt too still, like the night had stopped moving. Eventually I laughed to myself. Forced, hollow. Probably a moth, I muttered. But I didn't press play again. When I finally went to bed, I left the blinds cracked open just enough to see that light. Some part of me wanted proof it would stay dark. It didn't. At 2:37 a.m., a sharp click woke me. The light outside was on again. Only this time, it stayed on. I lay there, eyes half open, watching the thin line of brightness spill through the blinds. The rain had stopped, but a slow tapping replaced it, irregular, deliberate, against the glass. Tap, pause, tap. I held my breath, waiting for it to stop. Instead, it grew slower, heavier, like a fingertip pressing and dragging down the window pane. I reached for my phone, opened the security cam app. The camera faced the yard, mounted high above the porch light. At first, the feed showed nothing, just my reflection ghosted in the dark glass. Then the image jerked. A blur passed close to the lens, leaving a trail of distortion, like static rippling through water. I rewound the footage 10 seconds, frame by frame. On the 7th frame, just before the blur, I saw it. A shape, a face, or half of one, barely visible in the corner. Not looking into the camera, but through it. Eyes fixed exactly where I was sitting inside. My stomach turned cold. I jumped from bed and ripped open the blinds. Nothing. Just the yard, wet grass shining under the motion light. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I looked long enough, I'd see something move in that reflection again. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the edge of my bed, eyes fixed on the faint glow coming from the window. The motion light outside flickered once more and finally went out, leaving me swallowed by the dark hum of the apartment. I told myself I'd check the yard in the morning, that it was nothing. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. At 3:04 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was the security camera again. Motion alert detected. My heart thudded against my ribs as I tapped the notification. The footage loaded slowly, pixels dragging across the screen like wet paint. The camera showed my backyard again. Nothing moved for the first few seconds, until something leaned into the frame. It was the same face, pale, thin, lips curled into a faint, crooked smile, too wide, too deliberate. The person stood completely still, half their face hidden by the reflection of the light. They were close enough that the camera's night vision warped the details of their skin, turning them ghost white. Then the figure stepped back into the dark, vanishing completely. I froze. I didn't even breathe until the video ended. It was only 12 seconds long. My first thought was to call the police. But what would I even say? That some stranger smiled into my security camera? That they might still be outside? Instead, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. The switch clicked, the sound absurdly loud in the silence. The beam cut across the small living room up to the glass sliding door. I could see my reflection, wide-eyed, tense. Behind it, the yard looked empty. I pressed the flashlight against the glass to see farther. That's when I noticed something new. On the outside of the window, faint smears, fingerprints. A line of them, right where someone would have pressed their hand if they were peering in. I took a step back. Every instinct told me to lock myself in my room, to wait until morning, but I needed to know. I opened the sliding door just an inch and shined the light out. The air was damp, smelling like wet earth. The grass glistened silver under the moonlight. Nothing. I stepped outside, barefoot, heart pounding so loud it blurred out every other sound. The yard was small, fenced, with a narrow path leading to the gate. The flashlight beam moved slowly along the fence line, nothing but grass and a few scattered cigarette butts. They weren't mine. I crouched to look closer. The edges were still darkened with moisture, but the tips were dry, like they'd been put out less than an hour ago. A sound cracked behind me, not loud, just the faint shuffle of something brushing against the glass door. I turned instantly, flashlight jerking toward the sound. Through the reflection of the beam, I saw movement inside the apartment, a shadow moving past the curtain. I ran back in, nearly slipping on the tile. The living room was empty. The only sound was the faint hum of my computer fan from my bedroom. The monitor was on again, and on the screen, security footage showed me standing in the yard, flashlight aimed toward the window, while a figure stood inside behind the curtain, watching me. I stood there frozen, half inside, half out, watching that security feed replay. The timestamp at the bottom flickered, numbers skipping backward for a second before returning to normal. In the footage, I was still outside, scanning the yard with my flashlight. But inside, behind the curtain, there was someone else. It was only visible for a few seconds, but I saw enough. A silhouette, tall, motionless, leaning just slightly forward, watching me. When I blinked, the screen went black. All the monitors cut out at once. And then, every light in the apartment shut off. The power was gone. I remember whispering, "No, no, no, no," under my breath, gripping the edge of my desk until my knuckles went white. The silence that followed was suffocating. The rain outside had stopped. Even the wind seemed to hold still. It was just me and the sound of my own breathing. Then, faintly from the hallway, came the softest creak, like a single step on an old floorboard. I turned the flashlight on again. Its narrow beam trembled as I moved it slowly toward the sound. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered, shadows thick in every corner. I could see the bathroom door slightly ajar, the mirror inside catching the faint light. Nothing moved. I stepped closer. Another creak. This time, right behind me. I spun around, heart slamming in my chest. The beam hit the window, and there it was. A face. Pressed against the glass from the outside, inches from where I stood. Half of it hidden by the frame, but close enough that I could see the wet reflection in its eyes. The mouth hung open, like it had been caught mid-laugh. For a few seconds it didn't move. Neither did I. The only sound was a faint, slow tapping. One fingertip tapping the glass. Over and over. Tap, tap, tap. My throat closed up. I couldn't scream. Couldn't even back away. Then, just as suddenly, the power flickered back on. Lights flashed to life, monitors rebooted with a high-pitched whine, and the face was gone. I dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, spinning light wildly along the walls. The room looked normal again, too normal. I ran to the window, yanked the curtains open. Nothing but my backyard, still and empty. But as I looked down at the glass, I saw something that made my stomach twist. A faint smudge in the shape of a handprint. Long fingers wider than mine, streaking downward like it had dragged across slowly before disappearing. That was it. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and locked myself in the bathroom. The dispatcher stayed on the line, her voice calm, steady, asking me questions I could barely answer. Do you see anyone outside? No. Do you have any weapons? No. I don't know where he went. It took them 15 minutes to arrive. Longest 15 minutes of my life. When the red and blue lights finally washed across the walls, I ran to the door and opened it. 2 officers entered first, guns drawn. They checked the yard, then the apartment. One of them came back a few minutes later, shaking his head. No one's out there, he said. No signs of forced entry. But then he paused near the window. He leaned closer, pointing his flashlight at the glass. Wait, you see that? There were footprints. Faint, but clear. Muddy prints circling around the building. At least half a dozen of them. Some leading right up to my window. Some leading away. And one set that didn't seem to lead anywhere. Just stopped in the middle of the yard, like the person had vanished. The officer crouched to get a closer look. You said you've been here alone all night? I nodded. He turned toward the grass, scanning with his light again. There's something else here. He stepped off the path and came back holding a small object in his glove. A cigarette butt, barely burned, the tip still warm. He dropped it into an evidence bag, zipped it shut, and looked at me quietly for a moment before saying, "Whoever was out here, they weren't in a hurry to leave." That line still echoes in my head sometimes. They stayed with me until sunrise, checking the security system and taking my statement. When they finally left, the house felt different. Like every sound had meaning. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, even the faint whisper of the wind through the vents. Everything made me jump. Around 7 a.m., I got a call from one of the officers again. He said they reviewed my camera footage at the station. But there was a problem. The video of the face, the one that had triggered the motion alert, wasn't there. The file name existed, but when they tried to open it, it showed only static and a timestamp that froze at 3:11. The same time the power went out. He told me to stay somewhere else for a few nights while they investigated. So I packed a bag, drove to a friend's apartment across town, and crashed on their couch. For the first time in days, I slept barely. But when I woke up, my phone had a new notification. Security motion alert. Backyard, AM. My blood went cold. I opened the live feed, heart racing. The camera showed my backyard again, same as always, nothing out of place. Until I looked closer. In the reflection of the sliding glass door, I saw it. A faint outline, right by the window. A figure leaning forward, just barely visible, not smiling this time, just watching. And on the window itself, fogged slightly from the morning dew, someone had drawn a single word, written backward from the outside. Hi. That night, I unplugged every camera, turned off every notification, and deleted the security app. It didn't help. Because even now, when I stay somewhere new or pass a window after dark, sometimes I feel it. That quiet, invisible weight of eyes on the other side of the glass. And sometimes, if the light catches just right, I swear I can still see that half smile. Waiting. Would you still be able to sleep in that room after seeing that face? Story 3. The voice from upstairs. The app said, motion detected upstairs, but I was already up there. That was the notification that made my blood run cold. Not the sound of it, just the words. I was standing in the upstairs hallway of my brother's house, holding my phone, staring at that alert. Motion detected upstairs. It didn't make sense. I was upstairs, alone. The night had been still, too still. Even the cat, usually wandering around and knocking things over, was hiding somewhere under the couch. It was supposed to be an easy favor. 3 nights in my brother's house while he and his wife were away. Feed the cat. Water the plants. Lock the doors. That was it. But there's something about staying in someone else's house, especially when it's too quiet. The silence feels different. Every sound echoes longer than it should. Every creak in the floor feels like it belongs to someone else. The first night had been fine. I watched TV until late, fed the cat, and went to bed in the guest room. But the second night, that's when I started noticing it. That faint echo from upstairs. Not footsteps, not quite, just movement. At first I thought it was the pipes or the wind against the siding. The house was old, built in the 70s, but every time I muted the TV I could hear it again, that quiet, rhythmic shuffle, like someone pacing just one floor above me. There was an attic up there, accessible by a pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. I'd seen it once years ago when we were helping him move in. But my brother told me not to bother going up there. He said they never used it. That night, as the sound persisted, I decided to check the security feed. My brother had installed a smart camera system, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and one aimed at the staircase. I opened the app. The feed was clear. Empty hallway, empty staircase, no motion. I laughed it off, shaking my head. You're just tired, right? I told myself. But then I got that notification again. Motion detected upstairs, the exact same timestamp as before. 1:11 a.m. It was like the system was stuck in a loop, or it was trying to warn me. I walked to the base of the staircase and looked up. The landing was dark, lit only by the glow from my phone screen. The air felt colder up there, heavier somehow. I climbed the steps slowly, one creak at a time. Halfway up, I paused. There it was again. That whisper. Not a word I could make out, just a sound, faint and low, like a voice caught between walls. It stopped the second I moved. The top of the stairs opened into a narrow hallway with 3 doors. The guest room, the master bedroom, and the small closet near the attic ladder. I toward the master bedroom first, door closed. Then the guest room, open, empty, bed neatly made. And then the closet. The air around it felt cold. Stale. The attic door above it was slightly ajar. I froze. That door had been shut earlier. I knew it. I'd looked up at it when I brought the cat upstairs. Now one of the hinges hung down just enough to show darkness behind it. Not pitch black, just deep shadow. I stared up for a long time, holding my breath, waiting for some sign that it was just a draft. But nothing moved. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had moved before I looked. Like the moment I entered the hallway, whatever was behind that door had gone still. I grabbed the broom from the hallway corner and used the handle to push the attic door shut. It clicked lightly into place. I exhaled and forced a laugh that didn't sound like mine. See? Wind, I said under my breath. I even smiled for a second. But then from somewhere deep inside that ceiling came a sound I'll never forget. One slow step. A faint shift of weight on wood. Not above the ceiling beams, directly above me. That's when I realized it wasn't just wind. Something, or someone, was up there. I didn't check the app again that night. Didn't even look at my phone. I went downstairs, grabbed the cat, locked myself in the living room, and waited for morning. The house was silent again by 4 a.m., but I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Because every few minutes, I'd hear the faintest creak from above the living room ceiling, and then stop. Like whoever or whatever was up there was listening for me. By morning, the sound was gone. The attic door was closed tight. I almost convinced myself it was all a dream. But when I opened my phone, the app's motion log said otherwise. Motion detected, 1:11 a.m. Motion detected, 2:11 a.m. Motion detected, 3:11 a.m. All the same timestamp. All while I was awake, downstairs, staring at the ceiling. That was the moment I stopped believing it was a glitch. Because whatever was upstairs wanted me to notice. The second night started the same way. Quiet, still, almost peaceful. But peace feels different when you're waiting for something to break it. I tried not to think about the attic. Tried not to think about those identical timestamps. I made dinner, fed the cat, and turned on the TV just for background noise. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself glancing at the phone sitting on the counter. The same app still open, the same motion log waiting. By midnight, I started to relax. Nothing strange. No sounds, no whispers, and then it came. Motion detected, upstairs hallway, 1:11 a.m. The same notification. The same time. I froze, staring at the screen. The feed loaded, pixel by pixel, until the grainy hallway appeared. It looked normal. Still, I stared longer, searching every shadow for movement. That's when I saw it. The attic door, it was slightly open again, just like before. I stared at it for nearly a full minute before I realized something else. In the bottom corner of the feed, the timestamp read 12:11 a.m., an hour behind. I frowned, confused. The app time was right, synced to my phone. But the camera feed was showing footage from before. I watched as my own shadow passed through the hallway, the me from an hour ago, heading toward the guest room with a bowl of cat food. The realization hit slowly. I wasn't watching live footage. I was watching delayed footage. I turned off the feed, heart pounding. The phone felt heavy in my hand. And then, a faint sound from upstairs. That same slow, dragging creak across the ceiling. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera feed again, hoping to catch whatever caused it. The screen loaded, the hallway appeared, and there I was, standing at the bottom of the stairs, flashlight in hand, watching the screen. Except, I hadn't moved yet. The figure on the feed was me, seconds ahead. He, or I, turned the flashlight upward toward the attic. And then the feed glitched, quick bursts of static, before freezing completely. I blinked hard, whispering, "What the hell?" When the image returned, the hallway was empty again. But the attic door was wide open. That was enough. I was done. I grabbed my keys, but before I could step outside, ping. Another notification. Motion detected. Upstairs hallway, 1:11 a.m. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help it. The feed opened automatically. And there, in the upper right corner of the screen, was a shadow standing just behind the attic door. Not human-shaped exactly. Too tall. Too still. It leaned slightly forward, like it was listening. Then the feed glitched again. This time, the image warped and stretched. The walls bent inward, the hallway darkened, until only the attic remained in view. And over the faint static, a whisper crawled through the audio. Low, drawn out, words barely formed. "Don't check again." The sound didn't come from my phone speaker. It came from the ceiling above me. I froze completely. The whispering wasn't through the feed. It was inside the house. The air felt electric, like every atom in the room was waiting for me to move. My first thought was to get out. My second was that maybe the system had a speaker. Maybe it was an automated message from the old nanny cam setup. But deep down, I knew better. I stepped closer to the base of the staircase and called out softly, "Hello." The whisper stopped. Silence filled the hallway like fog. Then something tapped the floor directly above me. 2 short knocks, then one longer one, like someone dragging their heel. I raised the flashlight toward the ceiling. The beam trembled in my hand. There was movement, faint but visible, right along the attic door's edge. Shadows shifting in slow, deliberate patterns. Then a soft voice. Almost kind. Almost gentle. "You shouldn't be here." I stumbled back, hitting the wall behind me. The light flickered once and died. Everything went black. The cat hissed from somewhere near the stairs. Tail puffed, its eyes locked on the ceiling. Then the attic creaked. A low, groaning sound like someone crawling across it, inch by inch. I ran to the front door, yanked it open, and stood outside in the cold air, trying to convince myself that what I heard wasn't real. The whisper followed me all the way out, soft, calm, close enough to feel. "Don't check again." I stayed in my car until sunrise. Every few minutes the phone buzzed again. Motion detected. Upstairs hallway. 1:11 a.m. Motion detected. Upstairs hallway. 1:11 a.m. Motion detected. Upstairs hallway. 1:11 a.m. The same time. Over and over. When I finally worked up the nerve to go back inside, the attic door was closed. The phone app was frozen. No new alerts since dawn. But every time I opened the camera feed, the same delayed image appeared. Me. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking up. I didn't sleep after that night. I couldn't. Even in daylight, the house felt wrong. Too quiet, too still. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards felt like it was waiting for me to notice. I tried to convince myself it was just the old security system. Maybe the timestamps were messed up. Maybe there was a glitch in the camera feed. But every time I opened the app, the same thing happened. It showed me, standing at the bottom of the stairs. Frozen. No matter what time I opened it, morning, afternoon, night, it always showed that same still frame. Except each time, the lighting in the image was darker. By the third day, it looked like night again. And in the corner of the frame, a faint blur near the attic door. At first, I thought it was dust. Then it shifted. It moved. Slowly, like something leaning forward. That was enough for me. I texted my brother and told him I couldn't keep house sitting. He asked why, and I just said, "The camera's acting weird. Might want to check it when you're back." But as I started to pack my things, I heard something, a single floorboard creak right above me. Then another, and another. I froze, staring at the ceiling. The sound was coming from the attic again. Heavy, uneven footsteps, like someone pacing. I opened the camera feed one last time. It loaded slowly, static flickering across the screen. Then the hallway appeared. The attic door was wide open. I stared hard at the shadows, trying to make out what was there. And then I realized the feed wasn't delayed anymore. Because as I lifted my phone, the figure on the screen did too. Perfectly in sync. It wasn't behind me, it was me. But the version on the screen wasn't moving the same way. My reflection, or whatever it was, stood completely still. Then a few seconds later, its head began to tilt. Slowly. Too far. Until it was looking straight up at the attic. My stomach dropped. The air in the room felt thick, hard to breathe. The cat darted out from under the table, bolting down the hall. And then, a whisper from upstairs. "Don't check again. Except this time." It sounded less like a warning, and more like a command. My hands shook. I tried to turn off the phone, but the feed wouldn't close. The buttons didn't respond. The image zoomed slightly, automatically, until all I could see was the top of the staircase. Then something came into frame. It was faint, almost transparent, the outline of a person standing just beyond the attic door. Its head leaned to the side, mirroring my own reflection perfectly. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor, screen cracking, the image still frozen in that same warped pose. I told myself not to look up, but curiosity or fear took over. I lifted my head toward the ceiling. The attic door was open, wider than before, and from the dark gap above, I saw it. A face. Not clear, pale, hollow, eyes like empty sockets that seemed to move without light. It was staring straight down at me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, every muscle screaming to run. Then the whisper came again, this time from directly behind my ear. "Don't check again." I turned, fast, but there was no one there. When I looked back up, the attic door was closed. Not slammed, just gently shut. The phone on the floor buzzed again. Motion detected. Upstairs hallway, 1:11 a.m., but it wasn't even night yet. I picked up the phone, trying to see if it was just repeating the old alert. But the feed showed something new. It wasn't the hallway anymore. It was the guest room. My bag was still on the bed. The cat sitting near the dresser. And in the corner of the room, perfectly still, was me, watching the door. I felt dizzy. My knees almost gave out, because I wasn't in that room. I was standing in the hallway watching it on the screen. But the version of me on the feed began to move. He turned slowly toward the camera, head lowering slightly, eyes dark and glassy. Then his mouth opened, wide, far wider than it should have, and the whisper bled through the speaker once more. "Don't check again." The voice came from the me on the feed. I dropped the phone and bolted for the door. Didn't even look back. As I ran out into the driveway, I could still hear that voice echoing faintly behind me. Not yelling, not chasing, just whispering the same words over and over. "Don't check again. Don't check again." When I finally made it to the car, I turned to look at the house one last time. Every window was dark, except one, the attic. And for a split second, I could have sworn I saw my own silhouette standing in it. I didn't go back to that house. Not that night, not the next. Not ever again. I spent the rest of the week at my apartment, barely sleeping, jumping at every sound my phone made. Every time it buzzed, I expected that same notification to appear again. Motion detected, upstairs hallway. But it never did. The app went silent, like it had never worked at all. My brother came back that Friday. He called me the next morning, his voice tired, casual, like he hadn't walked into something wrong. "Hey man, I got home. Everything looks fine. The cat's okay. You sure you didn't just dream that stuff?" I told him everything anyway. The feed delays, the voice, the figure in the attic. He didn't laugh, but he didn't believe me either. He just said, "I'll check the cameras myself." That night, he texted me a photo. It was the attic door, wide open, and below it, the small, black shape of an old camera. "You didn't install this, did you?" he wrote. I didn't even respond. He said it was tucked behind a beam, hidden near the corner, not connected to Wi-Fi, not plugged into anything modern. It had its own battery pack, covered in dust, and when he looked closer, it was still recording. He brought it downstairs and connected it to his laptop, just to see if it was working. The file timestamps were strange. Some went back years, Others were dated next week. The first video he opened showed the empty hallway, perfectly still. Then, after a few seconds, something drifted across the frame. A shape. He said it looked like me, just standing there, even though I hadn't been in that house since the night I ran. The next clip was the living room, again, empty. Until faintly, the attic door in the background began to open. No sound. No movement otherwise. Just that door, slowly inching open like it was breathing. My brother sent me the footage. When I opened it on my phone, the file was grainy, flickering with static. But as I watched, a faint whisper came through the speakers. Not clear. Not words, just the sound of breath, like someone whispering inches from the microphone. Then, faintly, under the noise, I heard it. Don't check again. I threw my phone across the room. He texted me 2 minutes later. That's weird. The audio didn't play for me. It was silent. I didn't respond, didn't know what to say. A few days later, he called again. He sounded different this time. Quieter, distracted. Hey, I think the app's glitching. It keeps saying motion detected upstairs, but I'm sitting up there right now. My blood went cold. I told him to get out, right now. But he just laughed nervously and said, relax, probably a delay or something. It's showing me sleeping on the couch, but I'm not even in that room. He said he'd reset the router and call me back. He never did. When I tried calling him the next morning, there was no answer. No voicemail. Just the sound of static that didn't belong on a phone line anymore. I drove to his place that afternoon. The cat was sitting by the front door, scratching to get out. Inside, the house was quiet, eerily still. Coffee mug half full on the counter. Phone on the table, screen cracked. His car was in the driveway, his keys were on the counter, but he wasn't there. Upstairs, the attic door was open again. I stood at the bottom of the staircase for what felt like hours, staring up at it. No sound, no movement, just that heavy, pressing silence. Finally, I took a step forward, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. Motion detected, upstairs hallway, 3:14 a.m., but it wasn't 3 a.m., it was daylight. I opened the app. The feed flickered, then loaded. Slow, glitchy, like an old tape rewinding. And there he was, my brother, standing halfway up the stairs, looking up at the attic door. Phone in his hand, just like me. The timestamp on the feed said tomorrow. Then the screen glitched again. The camera angle tilted just slightly, and I saw it. A pale hand reaching down from the darkness above the attic door, touching his shoulder. And then, static. The screen froze on a single frame, the attic door wide open, the stairs empty. I backed away slowly. Didn't even realize I'd dropped my phone until I heard it hit the floor. The notification flashed one last time. Motion detected. First floor hallway. The feed switched automatically. For less than a second, I saw something on the screen. It wasn't the hallway. It wasn't the stairs. It was me. Standing right there, holding my phone, watching the feed. And just before the screen went black, that same voice whispered through the speaker. Don't check again. I ran. I don't know what happened after that. I moved cities, changed my number. I never talked about that night again, until now. My brother's house is still there. New people live in it now. But sometimes, late at night, I still get the notification. Motion detected, upstairs hallway, even though that app isn't installed on my phone anymore. Being home alone isn't supposed to be terrifying, but sometimes, it's the quiet that reminds you, you're not. Submit your story, if you dare.